What's going on, everybody? Kalipus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro and going over whether or not it's a good phone to buy in 2023. As always, if you want to learn more about this phone, including information about pricing, availability, and some of the best accessories for it, definitely check out the various links in the video description. But otherwise, let's get into it. Now, at this point in early 2023, the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro really isn't that old, but like always at this time of year, lots of other really good 5G phones are coming out, so we're going to take another look at this phone and really go over how it currently stacks up to what's out there. So with the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro, we're getting a really large 6.82-inch IPS LCD display with a 720p resolution, a PPI of 263, and a 20.5:9 aspect ratio. So with this phone, on one hand, the image quality really isn't that impressive. I mean, sure, it's not bad, but at the same time, if you're watching lots of videos and stuff like that, if that's really the main thing you're doing with your phone, you're probably gonna wanna get something that has a 1080p resolution instead. Now, in this price range, at least at this point in the year, there aren't really gonna be a ton of phones that have 1080p resolutions, but they still are out there. So just keep in mind, if you're consuming a ton of content where the image quality really matters, then while it's not really bad on this phone, especially if you're only watching the occasional video every now and then, if you happen to have higher expectations, it might not be the best. Now, that being said though, aside from the image quality, the size and dimensions we're getting here are actually really good, especially compared to most phones in this price range. At 6.82 inches, this is a really large display. In fact, pretty much the largest display you can get in a smartphone. So if you're doing something like reading, for example, things of course are going to be larger and easier to see. And then with the 20.5:9 aspect ratio, we're getting a taller and more narrow form factor. And this is going to give you a more immersive experience in landscape mode. And then if you're doing something like browsing the web or using social media, with a form factor like this, you can fit more content on the screen without having to scroll as much. So overall, on one hand, if you really just want a content consuming machine, if you're going to be watching all kinds of videos, looking at photos and stuff like that, and you want a really nice looking picture, this is probably not going to be the phone for you. But compared to most phones in this price range, because of the size and form factor, I do think it is pretty good. Now for storage, the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro is getting 128GB of internal storage. And like most Android phones, we are also getting microSD card expansion here. Now, especially for this price range, but honestly for pretty much any phone that's not a flagship phone, 128GB is definitely a good amount of storage. For the average user, you're probably not even going to need to use a microSD card, but again, with this phone, you can if you want. But in general, considering that around this $200 price range, most phones only have 64GB. If storage is a bit more of a priority for you, then the Revvl 6 Pro is definitely going to be a great choice. For security features, the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro does have face unlock, as well as a fingerprint scanner right here on the power key. So of course, definitely a great spot for a fingerprint scanner. But real quick, let's give it a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, real fast and responsive, no issues at all. Now for the camera setup here, we got a water drop notch for the front facing camera. This camera is 16 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a quad camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. For video, this phone can record in up to 2K in the rear camera and 1080p in the front. So as far as camera features go, this phone has pretty much everything, including an ultra wide camera and a macro camera. So if you're taking a lot of pictures and you want a wider variety of features, then a phone like this is going to be a great choice for you. In addition to having these features, the photos this phone actually takes are actually really good too. Sure, on one hand, if you compare them to more of a mid-range phone like the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G, for example, they're not going to be quite that good. But for regular casual use, maybe a couple nice Instagram photos here and there and stuff like that, I do think this phone definitely will get the job done. And if that kind of thing is really all you're doing with your camera, then while obviously there are plenty of phones out there with much better cameras, this is probably all you're really gonna need. Now when it comes to RAM and processor, with the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro, we're getting 6GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 700 processor. Now I've seen this processor in all kinds of different phones before, and that's really not a bad thing, because for what it is, the performance we're getting here is actually really good. For more basic activities, like web browsing, social media, stuff like that, this is honestly going to be perfect. Sure, it's not the fastest phone out there, and if you're going to be on your device all day, it might feel like it's a little bit on the slower side, but I'd say for average, more casual use, it still will get the job done, and in general, I feel like most people are probably going to have a pretty good experience here. Now, I did run a benchmark test on this phone using Geekbench 5. And here are the results I got. Now, what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone and then comparing your results to these. And that's going to give you a better idea of whether or not this phone's going to be a performance upgrade for you. Because depending on what you're coming from, it may or may not be. I mean, if you have something like an older Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G, for example, the performance with a phone like that that's really an older mid-range phone is essentially going to be about the same. But if you're coming from maybe an entry-level 4G phone, then chances are this phone will be a pretty solid upgrade. So again, definitely run this test on your own phone, and that's going to give you a much better idea of where this one stands. But in general, again, for most people, it will get the job done. And at this point in 2023, compared to the average entry-level 5G phone, while it's not really anything spectacular, it definitely still is good. So at the end of the day, I really can't complain here. Now for the battery, the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro has a 5000 mAh battery that supports 15 watt fast charging, so definitely a great battery here. With a 5000 mAh battery, you can expect to get really good battery life and longevity. So if you really have to use your phone a lot, but you want something that's actually going to last all day, then this phone is definitely going to be good for that situation. Now when it comes to charging speeds, with 15 watt fast charging, sure, it's not really the best fast charging you can get. In fact, compared to a lot of other phones out there, it's actually pretty low. But again, this is a really entry-level phone, so for what it is, I feel like it is at least okay. Now that being said, one cool thing about this phone's battery is that with the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro, we actually are getting wireless charging. And while I don't think it's really a feature people are actually going out of their way to find, it is still a nice thing to have. So if you do like that feature, definitely keep in mind, this is one of the few non-flagship phones that has it. Now as far as software goes, with the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro, we are getting Android 12, which is at least decent. Sure, it's not Android 13, and unfortunately, since this is more of a carrier-branded entry-level kind of phone, I don't really expect it to get any major updates either. As far as the software goes, this phone does have Android 12, which is at least decent. I mean, it really is just an entry-level phone, but of course, since this is 2023 and we're on Android 13 at this point, keep in mind this phone, being more of an entry-level carrier-branded phone, is most likely not going to be getting any major updates. I could be wrong about this, but I definitely wouldn't count on it. So if having the latest version of Android is important to you, then I would definitely go for something else. But that being said, I personally don't think Android 12 on a phone like this is really that bad. So if you're not too concerned about the software, but you just want something decently newer, then this is probably not going to be a problem. Another thing to keep in mind here is that with the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro, we are getting NFC. So if you like to make contactless mobile payments using tap and pay, keep in mind you can do that with this phone, no problem. But in conclusion, is the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro really worth buying in 2023? In general, despite definitely not being the perfect device or anything, for some people, I do think it definitely is worth it. One thing to remember here is that with the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro, despite the full price being around $219, $220, a lot of people, in fact most people, probably aren't going to be paying that for it. T-Mobile and Metro offer so many different deals that with this phone, the main purpose of it is giving you an affordable 5G phone that maybe doesn't have the best or nicest features or anything, but does have pretty much the basic essentials to get you through the day. So in general, if you are looking for more of an entry-level 5G phone and your needs really aren't that complex, you don't need a super fancy display, crazy fast performance, really high camera quality, or the latest version of Android, and you really just need something basic to get the job done, in that kind of situation, I do think that for what it is, the T-Mobile Revvl 6 Pro is actually a really good option. Now once again, if you want to learn more about this phone, definitely check out the video description, where I will be linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipa's Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.